You're listening to Dodge Movie Podcast. Your hosts are Christy and Mike Dodge, the founders of Dodge Media Productions. We produce films and podcasts, so this is a podcast about films. Join them as they share their passion for filmmaking.
Here's one of our great reviews that we've gotten on iTunes. We really appreciate those, so be sure to go to your iTunes or favorite podcast app and leave your review, and maybe we'll read it here. P. Smiles gave us 5 stars and said, passion for movies matched by chops for breaking down films. Excited to listen to these two passionately and knowledgeably discuss likes and dislikes, but also nuances and technical film aspects that I wouldn't have noticed. Podcast has a feel of an informal, fun chat among cinema lovers, and I'm impressed with the beginnings.
Woohoo!
Yeah, great start for us. All right. Thank you so much, everybody who have left reviews, and we look forward to hearing more about what you guys think about the podcast. Welcome back, everyone, to this third week of April when we are going back in time now. We did The French Connection, then we went forward and did Chips, and now we're going back to 1977 to talk about a big favorite of mine as a kid. It was a big favorite in our household, Smokey and the Bandit. How about you, Mike?
I kind of liked the Burt Reynolds movies in general, Smokey and the Bandit and Cannonball Run, Gumball Rally, those kind of things. So, all the car movies in that era.
Yeah. Action-packed, kind of. He was the rebel, kind of going against the law in a lot of those films.
Well, it's interesting because the basic premise of this film is that smuggling liquor and multi-state high-speed chases are fun. And obviously, they establish this with, early in the film, they have kind of the 4th of July bunting and the music and stuff that the bandit is actually the gentleman bandit, right? He's the hero, kind of the Robin Hood, right? He's technically breaking the law, but he's really a good guy.
Mm-hmm. The quote I pulled is, Bandit says, "For the good old American life, for the money, for the glory, and for the fun, mostly for the money."
Mostly for the money.
Yeah.
Seems very American, I suppose.
Yep. So this film came out in 1977. I was 6 years old. I can't believe I saw it then.
I think you probably saw it in the theater. I think your mom took you.
You think I saw it in the theater? I was thinking more like the Friday night ABC movie, maybe like in 1979 or something.
Yeah, we probably both saw it on television.
Yeah. I can't believe
CBS
it.
Sunday night film or something like that.
Yeah. So it was rated PG, but I looked up, it probably would have rated a PG-13, but that didn't come out until 1984.
Well, they had such delightful missed oaths like, who gives a turkey, which everyone says.
Right. Yes. I will talk about later Jackie Gleason's colorful language that he used, but let's run down the stats. So this was directed and written by Hal Needham, who was more well known as a stunt person. He heard of somebody smuggling beer across state lines and thought this would make a good story. So he wrote it up, and he had in mind his friend Jerry Reed, who was a country singer, and told him about it, and he was going to play Bandit. But then Burt Reynolds heard about it when Hal Needham was Burt Reynolds' stuntman in Gator, and they were filming down in Florida. And Burt said, "No, I'm going to play the bandit."
You know, it's interesting about that plot of smuggling Coors. One of my school chums used to, when he was at university, drive multiple states in his Blazer to get a bunch of cases of Coors and then bring them back to his state of education and sell them at a profit. And I'm being a little cagey because he went on to a career in federal law enforcement, and maybe he doesn't want me sharing his name and details, but apparently this is a profitable thing to do.
I think we need to call this fella up and let him know that he was spoken about.
Yeah, he's the bandit.
Yeah. So Burt Reynolds, Sally Field, Jerry Reed, and Paul Williams, among many others, are in this film. And it's just a fun romp.
Yeah, it really is just kind of silly and lighthearted. There's, throughout the film, an interesting suspension of disbelief, but it all plays because this is just fun.
Yeah. It's an hour and 36 minutes, rated, like I said, PG. It's an action-adventure comedy. And the synopsis is basically the bandit is hired to run a tractor trailer full of beer over state lines, like we said, in hot pursuit of by a pesky sheriff.
If you do the math, each one of those beers is like $25. There's no way it was worth the money.
No. The tagline for this film was... I found a couple that I thought were fun. This was another film that had like 6 taglines, but these were my favorites. What we have here is a total lack of respect for the law, which was a line of Jackie Gleason's.
Which actually kind of harkens back to Cool Hand Luke, right? What we have here is a failure to communicate. So I don't know if that was purposeful, and we'd have to look up the actual dates.
Right.
Was that a common phrase in the 70s?
Other one is the CB comedy that rides the airwaves of laughter.
Don't think that captures the spirit of the film quite as well.
So for those of you under the age of probably like 45, CB stood for Citizen Band Radio. And it was a whole culture. In fact, my dad, being a CHP officer, we had a Citizen Band Radio. We belonged to a CB club. And therefore, each one of us, when I say us, it was all the members of my family, my mother, father, and me. We had our own handle, which was like our nickname. And so my dad was Stinger, I think. Yes, I believe my dad was Stinger. So we had to fall in a whole line of bee-related themes.
Well, he was a CB, right? The construction battalion.
Yes, he
so
was
that's
part-
where that came from.
And then my mom was...
You were Baby Bee, if memory serves.
Yes, I was Baby Bee, and she was Mama Bee, I think.
Queen Bee?
I don't know if she was Queen Bee. Shoot, I should have called her before this.
And your dog could have been Drone.
I'm totally getting confused. We may have to record a whole redo for this, because now I'm wondering, was the dog... No. The dog was Bee Biter, because as a lot of dogs will do, if he saw Bee, he would bite. Yeah, the dog was Bee Biter, Dad was Stinger, Mom was Mama Bee, and I was Baby Bee.
Right. Fun fact, I also had a nickname with my family of origin. I was just, hey, dummy.
Okay, one last little bit about the CB culture.
Oh, yeah.
You could not belong to the CB club unless you had the ornately decorated felt vest.
Ooh.
That had your handle. It had the logo of the club on the back, and then embroidered on the front was your handle. It's around here somewhere.
Wow. So for the people who aren't following this whole thing at home, the FCC controls the airwaves of the United States, the different frequencies, and Citizens Band was a set of frequencies, a band of frequencies that was given up to basically the unregulated, unwashed masses. So you didn't have to go through any sort of training and qualification like with a ham radio. You didn't have to have like your actual license, K67454 or anything like that. It was just all gloves were off. And it originally was used by, those bands were used by police, I think, as well, but mostly the truckers as a way to communicate. And apparently they were not happy when these movies like Convoy and Smokey and the Bandit popularized it, because then some bunch of chuckleheads would get these radios and clog up the airwaves.
And there's a whole lingo and language of their own, which is highlighted in Smokey and the Bandit. There was code words for going to the bathroom. There were code words for there's a policeman up ahead. There were code words for how we can hide from the policeman and all that stuff. So it's a whole culture. It's fascinating. You get a little glimpse in this film, Smokey and the Bandit. Largely filmed in Georgia and Florida. And then the opening scenes with what the big celebration that you were talking about at the beginning with the bunting, that happened in Griffith Park, Ojai, and in the Santa Monica Mountains. So this film pretty much gets kicked off with the challenge of, can Bandit drive from Texarkana, where he's going to pick up the beer, and drive it to Atlanta? Now, I looked it up because I was curious. It's 664 miles. It would take about 9.5 hours. Do you remember in the movie what his time frame, like,
28 hours.
so he had 28 hours to get beer 664 miles.
Well, you might argue the 28 hours started when he was there, so maybe it was round trip. So he had 19 hours of driving in a 28-hour period, right? Plus, he had to go get Jerry Reed and a basset hound and a car. So maybe it worked out to be tight. I don't know.
Okay. It definitely, the film makes you think that it's a tight window.
Right, which is good screenwriting because you set up that tension, right? You give him a deadline that he's up against, so it increases the tension for the viewer. Will he make it?
But that tension is ruined now with the internet, because I was able to look up that it should only take him 9.5 hours.
He didn't have an iPhone.
Right. But nonetheless, it's a great film. So.
Remember that part where I said you had to suspend your disbelief?
Yes.
So the other part of that, too, was he has to be in the car somehow to make the truck go faster. And so it was never really explained how the lead car would make it go faster. Was the intent that he would attract the police and lead them on a merry chase? But then it seems to me, even in the 70s, they had telephones that maybe, the Texas or Arkansas police might call ahead and say, just go ahead and block off the interstate. We're trying to capture this idiot in a black Trans Am. And the truck would be stopped. So it seemed like maybe there was a little bit I didn't quite follow there.
What were you saying about suspending disbelief?
Yeah, but it's a lot of fun, so let's not look too closely.
It is. It's just a fun chase. Isn't the chase movie? That's why we picked it. So the writing has we found some holes. How was a stuntman not a writer? But he cast well. So he chose Jackie Gleason to play kind of like the stodgy Sheriff Buford T Justice. And the reason that they picked that name, there's actually Burt Reynolds knew of a sheriff of that name, and that's why they picked it. Can you believe it? I mean, that just sounds like a movie name.
It does, but did they get the life rights for that guy? There could be a lawsuit.
There very well could be a lawsuit. And he has some colorful language that Jackie himself improvised. A couple of my favorites was he called his own son a tick turd.
I think he also called him a moose twit.
Yes. He liked alliteration because his other, I believe once again for his son, was a possum pecker.
According to the trivia, originally in the script, Buford T Justice was just driving by himself, and Jackie Gleason said he needed a character to play off to say all these crazy things.
Right.
So they got this guy who was known for, I think, his Tarzan movies, this tall drink of water, good-looking guy to play an idiot. And he had almost no lines of dialogue. He basically just got beaten with a hat. That was, insulted. That was the essence of his job that day.
Pretty much. So you have Burt Reynolds, and he needs somebody in his passenger seat. Because it's not enough that he's got Jerry Reed in the truck behind him, Snowman, who's got the beer, and a gorgeous basset hound sitting next to him, Fred. Burt Reynolds' character, the Bandit, needs somebody, and so they pick, straight from Gidget, Sally Field, who's kind of playing against type, because up until then she'd kind of been the squeaky clean kind of character. And now she's the runaway bride.
Yeah, before Julia Roberts came along,
right.
She originated this role.
Right. She's hooking up with this bandit fella.
Right, which is great. Take your hat off if you want to.
Right.
So it's a PG film. They had to be a little bit coy, but it was a good line. And there is no real romance between the two. They just kind of immediately had this chemistry, and that was that.
It was a whole movie of flirting, which was kind of fun.
But they went from flirting to consummation pretty quickly, in my opinion.
But the consummation was, I mean, it was the 70s probably, so it was alluded, not really.
Yeah, but when the hat's on the top of the T-top, you knew what was going down.
But and they definitely flirted with even some scandalous behavior. Like she changes her clothes in the front seat of the car and like throws the wedding dress. It's very dramatic.
Not
out
safe.
The T-top. No.
Kids, please don't.
The costuming in this film was so delightful and was even some of the gags.
Well, you got to highlight bell bottoms everywhere you looked.
Everywhere.
And they were not a little bit bell bottoms. They were big, wide, flared bell bottoms, which there were a couple of years, I think, in the 70s where that was considered fashionable. The turquoise jewelry he
I wrote
sported,
that down too.
I think that was probably period accurate, but I don't think I thought it was attractive in the period either.
Oh, and it wasn't just a turquoise ring, but his watch band.
Oh, yeah, and he had a lot of really large rings. How do you drive with those on your fingers?
Paul Williams and his father come out in matching suits, like white suits with, what's that called? Like piping
Yeah,
or
I would
something,
call
like
it
the
a
blue
piping.
piping.
Right.
The costumes is very reminiscent of the 70s with bell bottoms and trucker hats. Bandit has his classic hat that he wears.
I want to say from the cinematography, the opening shot
Yeah.
has the stacks of the diesel tractor, right? The semi with that starts up and everything, but against the orange of the dawn is really reminiscent of Days of Thunder to me. And I know, of course, Days of Thunder was after, and I think Tony Scott had his own directorial signature of the dawn. But that was amazing to me because I was thinking where it was set and the kind of story it was. Pretty sure everybody who was driving in Days of Thunder were aware of Smokey and the Bandit. They all grew up with it just like the rest of us did, right? And you'll notice also that the Trans Am often goes almost exclusively left or right across the screen, right? Which is generally the good guys go left or right in American cinema.
You always notice those things. That's awesome. Yeah, I forgot to tee up. Mike, what's your pickup line?
The first lyric we hear is from Jerry Reed. You heard about the legend of Jesse James, which is really good because right, the Bandit is bringing up that American Bandit. But the first actual spoken line is, "Hey Kirk, how you doing?" Doesn't really match.
Because it's almost like setting up where they're at, or
Yeah, the Kirk in that is a kid, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
But it's a character we never see again.
Yeah. What were some of the things that stuck out for you about the writing?
I mentioned before the 28-hour time limit sets up this tension with the narrative, but also it establishes for the viewer the bona fides of Bandit. They say, well, this is a difficult thing to do. Only you can do this. It shows that in that universe, right, that character is the pinnacle of talent and skill. But then we have a little bit of dialogue later when he goes to pick up Jerry Reed as a character Snowman to get him to drive the truck. And one of Snowman's kids say, "Hi, Uncle Bandit," and gives him a hug. And so that shows us that he's the gentleman bandit, right? He's like Robin Hood. He's really stealing from the rich and giving to the poor, which is reinforced later in the film when the tall character of the two says, "I'll give you a Cadillac and that'll leave me with an even dozen." So we're showing that he's got stupid rich money. He's got 13 convertible Cadillacs. He can give one away. He can pay $25 a can for this Coors beer, right? So again, it's this Robin Hood mythos that they're evoking.
Mm-hmm. And like you said, it's for the glory and the fun and the money, but mostly for the money. But I think for him, it's a stripe, a notch in his belt that he was able to do this impossible thing.
Right. You do definitely get the sense that Bandit would do it anyway,
Yeah.
regardless of the money.
Yeah, totally.
There's a part where Snowman is attempting to have some basic signal security by saying, if I say go to channel 21, I really want you to go to channel 19. And they go through this whole thing, and it's just very reminiscent to me of the Who's on First bit.
Yeah.
Right.
Bandit just cuts to the chase.
Yeah.
How about if you say 2, we go to 3? Oh, okay. That'll work too.
Okay.
That's a great scene. It's kind of highlighting that Bandit's the brains of the operation.
Now that I think about it, it also kind of reminds me of the scene in Indiana Jones where the guy's doing the complicated sword maneuver and he just pulls out his gun out and shoots him. It's like, that's an American hero. Like, we're going to cut to the chase. We're not going to dance around. Let's just cut to the chase and get going.
Right. At 15 minutes in, the bandit breaks the fourth wall. And
Yes.
I think that's a common phrase, but for anybody listening who doesn't know, it's basically when the character looks straight into the camera at the audience. And I don't think this was done very much at all in the 70s. I would be curious when we did start seeing it, but I think it's so perfectly timed because what precedes it is he's hiding from the sheriff. He's hiding behind a building and the sheriff goes by. And so he has eluded the sheriff. And when he looks into the camera and he smirks and he waggles his eyebrows, it's almost like he brings the audience in to the chase. Now we're part of it. Now we're part of the adventure of trying to elude Buford T Justice. And so now we're in on the ride.
Fast forward a few years, do you remember what television show's opening sequence has the character breaking the fourth wall famously, also with a fantastic mustache?
Chips. Oh, no. Oh, Magnum PI.
Magnum PI.
Yeah.
Right? And that's really, I think up until probably Smokey the Bandit, it was considered horribly wrong to, like wearing houndstooth checkers on film. You just don't do that. You don't break the fourth wall, ever.
It amps up the fun, to me, of the movie because it's like we're getting away with something. And I think the other thing that Smokey and the Bandit movies, or at least the Burt Reynolds movies did, is they were one of the first to show the gags at the end, which is something else I don't think you saw, because it was like Hollywood didn't want us to know that they made flubs, right? But
or that it was fun.
Yeah. But Burt showed us not only do we sometimes make mistakes, but it's like the most fun we have on the set because we're laughing at each other. And it became something that if you were watching a Burt Reynolds movie, you very much stayed till the end to watch that group have fun.
And speaking of Cannonball Run, the outtakes at the end with Dom DeLuise.
Oh, some of the best.
You like Burt Kreischer for basically the same thing. Dom and Burt had the same reaction to things, right? And so you could almost say that was part and parcel of why our generation of filmmakers got involved, because it led us into that world. We saw that they were humanized, the characters. But I want to return, though, to him breaking the fourth wall in this film in particular, because it matches with the tone of the film. And I mean this in a respectful way, but it's almost like you gave the stunt department $2 million and said, go make a film and put a plot between the stunts if you can, right? And I don't mean that as an insult. I mean that's awesome. This was all about the stunt people, right? We're going to have all these great chases. And then, yeah, there's a plot, but it's not like it's a Sherlock Holmes film where you have to take notes in a steno pad and figure it out at the end. It's just a fun film.
A pun intended, it's a fun ride.
It is a fun ride.
You're just going to go on a fun ride when you watch this film. Pretty much in this film, the sets were their car because we're either in the rig with Snowman and Fred. We're very much, we spend a lot of time in the Trans Am watching the relationship develop. They were strangers. He picks her up. She's run away from this wedding. Sally Field and Burt Reynolds' character, they're strangers. And we watch their relationship grow.
You know what's kind of funny is this is certainly not the first time I watched the film when we watched it recently, but it is the first time I realized that Jackie Gleason's son is the groom that she ran away from. That's probably obvious to the entire world except me.
Yeah, I think I knew that before.
Yeah, most intelligent people I think probably do.
And then obviously we see, spoiler, Buford T Justice's car pretty much evaporate over the course of the movie, which is so delightful.
And so it's to the point where later on in the film, spoiler alert, the top of it gets taken off.
Yeah.
Through a collision with something, but when there's close-ups of him acting in it, you can see the very clean cut where they had the sawzall that took off the A pillar and the B pillar. It was, and that's what I talk about. It works in this film.
Yeah.
It's just fun. Don't look too closely. It's a fun film.
Right, exactly. So it's kind of fun that the sets we get to know. And so in a bit, we're going to do your driving review, which I figure will be laden with some Trans Am facts. And I have a couple here too. But first I want to talk about the music. Country music was kind of in its heyday during this time. And Jerry Reed was a very famous, well-known country singer. And so Hal Needham goes to him and he goes, hey, I need a good theme song for this film. So Jerry pulls out his guitar and he starts working on what becomes Eastbound and Down, which I am proud to say my children know this song because just about any time we go on a road trip, I think I either sing it, I probably always sing it, but I play it.
And it's an earworm. I've been singing it for days now.
Yes. It's just such a great, great song. So Jerry pulls out his guitar, his acoustic guitar, and he starts playing it for Hal Needham, and Needham stops him immediately. And Jerry thinks, oh no, he doesn't like it. I got to rewrite it. And Needham looks at him and says, if you change one note, I will kill you. And the song went on to become one of Jerry Reed's greatest hits that he was well known for.
I think threatening to kill your crew is a hallmark of all good directors.
Well, and this month of chase films, it's a theme.
And it's a credible threat.
Right. And much like in The French Connection, where there was kind of that cello sting, the cello cue that Gene Hackman's character was kind of on the hunt for those criminals. This one, only it's Buford T Justice. When he is kind of on the hunt of the bandit, we get another little dun. It's like dun, 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 dun. And that's like, that cues us that, Buford T's up to no good. He's gonna get bandit. He's getting closer. I thought that was fun use of the musical score to kind of cue the audience into what's going on.
And they also had, if I recall correctly, kind of a hillbilly feel to a lot of the music there. But the quick finger picking, whether it was guitar or banjo, I think, establishes that tempo that goes well with a chase film.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Being a chase film, of course, we're going to have a driving review. And so let's launch into Mike's driving review.
First thing I got to say is Bandit fails miserably at keeping his eyes on the road throughout this film. Now, they were probably in a process trailer, so Burt Reynolds, the human being, knew that he wasn't about to crash into anything, but it's really a bad example for anyone. He spends a good 15 seconds at a time staring at Sally Field and giving dialogue.
She's cute.
She is cute. Yeah, and certainly she turned up the charm on this one. Fair enough, but still eyes on the road, Bandit, you're driving. And they establish at one point that he's driving really fast by showing a speedometer. If memory serves, she was reading the kilometers per hour, not the miles per hour.
When she said 110 or something, I went, I'm pretty sure that was not the miles per hour.
And so did they do that as kind of like to show that she didn't know anything about vehicles and to establish that he was driving very fast? However, they did speed up the film through certain points, you can tell. And early on in the film, there's a scene where both Bandit and Snowman are taking this sweeping left-hand turn. And that semi-truck did not roll at all, even though it looked like it was going about 200 miles an hour. There would have been some body roll. Those trucks do not have a stiff suspension. I could maybe buy the Trans Am having a stiff suspension, but not those. So obviously the Pontiac Trans Am is the signature vehicle of this film. One of the most famous cars, I think, in movie history. And there's a great line where Paul Williams' character is peeling off $100 bills. And Burt Reynolds' character, Bandit, says, I'm going to need money for a speedy car. And he says, speedier than that. And he keeps peeling off.
Yeah.
Of course, back in the 70s, would it be possible to go purchase a car with cash in a half an hour? However long they had? I mean, remember, we're the clock's ticking at that point.
I would think so. I don't know.
There was a great red convertible Cadillac Eldorado that comes in the beginning and the end of the film. A good Peterbilt truck. So one of the things I noticed in the middle of the film, one of the headlights is out on Bandit's Trans Am, and it doesn't appear to come back later. So I just thought it was interesting. Nobody ever mentions it.
Right.
But so maybe it was something that just it got damaged, because I will say they abuse those vehicles in this film. They went through a number of Trans Ams. Everyone seems to have a different number.
Oh, interesting, because I have 3, yeah.
Well, I read 3, some people said 4, some people said 6. So it's not exactly known how many they went through. But we do know for sure that the one where they do that jump was destroyed, which I think...
They jump, yeah, a bridge was out, and so he jumps, and that one wrecked.
Any chassis guy would tell you, yeah, that's going to destroy it. Did that bring the jump into our parlance, right? Because the Dukes of Hazzard famously killed Dodge Chargers doing those dumb jumps.
Funny that you bring up Dukes of Hazzard, because I felt like this film very much was reminiscent of Dukes of Hazzard, and so I looked up the timing.
Yeah.
And Dukes of Hazzard came out 2 years later, and I have to believe that people saw the success of this film. I'll go into the numbers later. It was quite successful,
Right.
And I think they recognized that people were wanting this type of kind of like Robin Hood, good guy bandit kind of thing,
Right.
And thus the development of Dukes of Hazzard started. I mean, it has to have been inspired by Smokey and the Bandit.
Well, now I'm curious, did John Schneider have a singing career before he was cast in Dukes of
I
Hazzard?
don't believe so, but I
But
thought
they
it
had
was
Waylon
after.
Jennings play the theme song, so there's
Yeah.
very much this
Country music,
similar,
yeah.
right? So a fun little not Dukes of Hazzard style reference is at one point when they're driving along and oncoming traffic is a white Mercedes sedan. In Georgia, how many white Mercedes sedans were driving around in 1978 in Georgia?
like I said, if it was that opening scene, it was back in LA or in California.
That actually makes a bit more sense. And so the last thing I would say is there were no seatbelts used, right? We talked about this in the French Connection about when did these seatbelts become available, but no one was wearing a seatbelt. They had a basset hound sitting on a bench seat in that truck. I'm not
With
sure.
the window open.
Yeah. Fred hopefully got paid hazard pay because I'm not comfortable that they took care
Yeah,
of Fred like
yeah.
we would like.
Yep. So while we're on the Trans Am, this movie was good for Trans Am sales.
Yeah.
Pontiac scored big. So I don't know, maybe they furnished them, although how could they have foreseen it? Pontiac Trans Am sales jumped from about 68,000 in 77 to 93,000 in 78.
Mm-hmm.
I think every dude in his 20s wanted a black T-top Trans Am.
Yeah. And I've heard that those T-tops they leak. They weren't really well made. But it's one of those things where it seems cool, so you want one. Now, I don't know the difference, so I will not speak, but apparently the vehicle that was used had some features that were from a different model year. So it was like 1 year to the next. It was kind of cobbled together. And so there's a little bit of kind of behind the curtains for movie making, is a lot of times these cars aren't exactly pristine like you would see on the street. So, for example, in the Fast and the Furious film, I know they put Chevy small blocks in a bunch of different cars, even if they weren't Chevys, because it was just easier for the company that was maintaining them to have the same engine. And so there's a lot of this kind of back and forth that goes on. And then the people who are really into these cars, it bumps them when they see that. Like, oh, those are the wrong wheels. What are you doing?
Yeah. Honestly, I don't think this movie should be remade. I think it just needs to be in a vault and be on its own. But it would need to be sanitized a little bit.
Just a little bit.
It was 1977, so there was a Confederate flag on the front license plate of the Trans Am.
Of the Trans Am.
That would need to be wiped off in our woke culture. That we would need to nix
Right.
that. I had a problem with Burt Reynolds' flagrant littering. When he was finished with something, he would just toss it out the window, and
Well,
I'm against that.
Sally Field was tossing
Yeah, wedding dresses,
wedding dresses and shoes.
and veils and shoes. Yeah.
So, did you notice the casual police brutality of Buford T Justice when he finds the three kids who, by the way, were stealing the wheels off of that vehicle? They were committing a crime.
Yes.
But there was quite a bit of just whacking of them with his nightstick or what have you. A lot of police brutality there.
Yeah. And some words that kind of came along with it, kind of like we
Yeah.
talked about in the French Connection.
Right.
There was some animal cruelty.
Yes, that poor basset hound.
Yeah.
The other thing that I noticed was early on, I think it was at a fair, somebody wins something and he grabs some woman
Yep.
and kisses her for a long number of seconds.
It doesn't ask for a kiss.
And it's obvious she doesn't want it.
She was not into it.
She was fighting the process.
Yeah, I had a problem with that. I was
Yeah.
going to bring that up when we talked about the smoochie. And I had a problem with Jerry Reed saying to Bandit, when asking about Sally Field being in the passenger seat, he says, "I'd like to take a run on her." I had a problem with that.
Yeah.
So we'd have to get rid of that line. But I want to stand on, I don't think this movie should be remade. I think it should just stand on its own and just be in the 1977 vault with Burt Reynolds, Jerry Reed, Sally Field, and just leave it alone.
Yeah, if we remade it today, it'd probably have to be in a Prius.
But could it be made today? Because, like, for example, I mean, first of all, we'd have to deal with the distance thing. But with cell phones, like, and is there, I mean, I guess it would have to be almost like marijuana or something, because there's no reason why you couldn't take, you know, and marijuana is so much smaller than these cases of beer. Like,
I think you're describing a movie called Super Troopers, but yeah.
Just leave it alone, everybody. Just I do not want to hear that like TriStar Pictures is remaking Smokey and the Bandit. It just needs to stay.
Well, you brought up a good point that with cell phones, would they just be able to call ahead? But there was that white Challenger that outrun the police helicopter a couple years ago. So maybe Dodge could get involved and, but I don't know.
Or, like, is this what Fast and Furious is?
Basically, I suppose. Except I don't think Vin Diesel is quite as charming in his character, Dom, as Burt Reynolds was as the Bandit. I mean, I think they're kind of going for a slightly different vibe.
Yeah. That's why just leave it alone. Just leave it alone, Hollywood.
But the thing that they need to capture is that playful fun, right? And I know people are going to say, oh, he's breaking the law, it can't be fun. I think we can find kind of a way to make it fun. And, you know, we talked about Dukes of Hazzard. Another great one of that was Chips. Like, somebody could remake that maybe with that, capture that sense of fun.
Somebody did.
Oh, gotta go see that.
We talked about it last week.
Really? Wow.
All right. So are you ready for the numbers? I want to hear how successful this movie was. Okay. The budget was $4.3 million.
Okay.
It grossed in 1977. It was the second highest grossing film. You know what was first? I know this time.
Well, that was Star Wars, right?
Star Wars
hard
was
to unseat
first.
the king.
Yeah, it's hard. It's very hard. It's $775 million for Star Wars, but this one brought in $300 million.
Okay, 75 times multiple. What was My Big Fat Greek Wedding? Because that's the champ, right? Of budget to gross.
Yeah. Well, here I was so excited that I knew the largest grossing, and you just stumped me.
And I just inadvertently did a Burt Reynolds laugh.
Yeah, you did. Yeah, you did.
Except my mustache has fallen down to my chin.
So this one was a success. IMDb gives it a 7. I'm largely influenced by nostalgia. I would have to give this one an 8 or a 9.
Oh, absolutely.
This one is such a good fun movie, as we've obviously talked about. There was unfortunately the one rapey smoochy in the early in the early scenes. We did not pause at all. We just watched this one straight through. There is a bit of head trauma. Poor Jerry Reed does not make it out of a bar without a few punches to his skull. So that's a little rough. But other than that, it's just pretty much a fun film. To learn more about what that process car is that Mike referenced, check out our social media that we did this week, because the film technique that we talked about was how in movies they get away with the driver looking away without crashing, is they use a process trailer. So we'll have a picture of that. So anyway, for those of you, like I said, under the age of 45 who have never heard of this movie, go ahead, watch it, realize that it was filmed in 1977, kind of throw out, you know, your nerd rage and your trying to make it make sense. Just go along for the ride. And those of you who saw it back in 77 or 79 as it were, like us, watch it again for some good fun. So anyway, that's next week we're going to actually a film that we know for a fact the director was inspired by Smokey and the Bandit and wanted to do a modern film that had kind of this type of vibe. We are going to be reviewing a little known movie called Hit and Run, written and directed by our favorite Dax Shepard. And it is also a very, very fun movie in the same type of vein. I think he nailed the fun comedic chase aspect of Smokey and the Bandit.
It is one of my favorite movies of all time.
Yeah. So watch Hit and Run this week. Join us next week. I guess that's us.
Dodgers never stop, and neither do the movies.
Thanks for listening to Dodge Movie Podcast with Christy and Mike Dodge of Dodge Media Productions. To find out more about this podcast and what we do, go to dodgemediaproductions.com. Subscribe, share, leave a comment, and tell us what we should watch next. Dodges never stop, and neither do the movies.